Today on Passion for Food, we're going to make one of the ugliest, most delicious things of all time, sausage and gravy pizza. This is a new take on the American Southern classic biscuits and gravy, except in crunchy pizza form. And to get us started, I'm going to show you the absolute fastest way to make a pizza dough, which, believe it or not, is actually in a food processor, which might seem like a bit of a mix-up, but trust me, you really need to try this method. Our ingredients are simple, starting with 3 cups of all-purpose flour, along with about 1 tablespoon of rapid rise yeast, and to help the yeast multiply, about 1 tablespoon of sugar, along with about a half teaspoon of salt. And let's not forget to put the actual blade for the food processor in there. Whoops. And that's it for our dry ingredients. So we'll go ahead and pop the lid on here and we'll just remove this little spout. That's where we're going to add in our warm water. But before we do, I like to give it just a couple of pulses to get things distributed. And with our water, it's important that this be warm, like 110 degrees or so. It should feel warm but not hot to the touch. And we simply want to pulse our food processor on and off as we stream in between 1 and 1 1/4 cups of warm water. What I really love about this method is because of the rapid twisting and cutting motions from that food processor blade. The whole process of making a dough goes from what would normally be 10 to 15 minutes to about 1 or 2 minutes. You see, a good bread dough is all about the formation of that gluten, which this simply produces much faster. And that's not just spin. Although I will warn you, being only about 1 or 2 minutes away from the perfect pizza or bread dough can carry its own risks. Once everything comes together, we want to run it for about a minute, and then we just want to check our dough. And this is what we want to see. It shouldn't be dry, it should be a little bit sticky, but not too sticky. It shouldn't be coming away with your hands too much. And I like it all in one bowl for the rising phase, so I'm just going to give it another couple quick pulses with the food processor to get it to all clump up together nicely for us. There we go. Now we're just going to pop this spout back in here, and I'm actually just going to let it rise in the food processor bowl. After all, who wants to make extra dishes? And while that rises, let's go ahead and get started on our sausage gravy. In a medium pan that has a lid, we want to melt about 1 tablespoon of butter. And we're going to use that to cook about 1 pound of your favorite breakfast sausage. I can't tell you the brand here, but my friends Jimmy and Dean, well, they really love this sausage. And we simply want to cook that over medium-high until it's cooked through. At which point I'm going to grind in a generous amount of fresh cracked black pepper. Pepper is one of the classic elements of a good sausage gravy, so don't be shy here. And while we do that, did you hear about what the peppercorn said to his wife after going through the grinder at work? Don't worry, I'm fine. Okay, let's finish grinding up here before I try and pepper in any more corny jokes. And the next thing we want to add is approximately 1/4 cup of flour. Now, I don't precisely measure this because it's going to vary a little bit depending on how fatty your sausage is and how thick you want your gravy, but 1/4 cup is a good place to start, and if you see more fat in your pan after getting that mixed in, just add a little more flour. And conversely, if not all your flour is getting mixed in, just add a splash more oil. And we want to simply continue cooking this for about 2 minutes just to get rid of that raw flour taste. At this point, we want to add some milk, and this is another thing that I don't really measure, and I don't think you should either, because the gravy can be a little thinner or a little thicker. There are really no right or wrong answers here, so just cook with your heart. Basically, I like to add a cup or a cup and a half and just see as it comes up to temperature if it's thick enough, and we'll add more milk as we go along. In fact, after just about a minute, I could already tell I was going to need at least another half cup or so. And keep in mind that flour isn't going to reach its maximum thickening potential until it actually comes up to a simmer. But we have to be careful not to raise the temperature too quickly with a super thick gravy like this, otherwise it can scorch to the bottom. And no one likes a scorched bottom. So once we see those telltale little bubbles, our gravy should be as thick as it's going to get. So we'll mix that up and add more milk if necessary. But assuming we're happy with that, we'll go ahead and give this a taste for seasoning. You'll notice I didn't add any salt earlier. Well, if we need to add any, now is the time. Most breakfast sausage is pretty salty, but this still needed about another half teaspoon or so. So we'll give that a final mix, and then we simply want to cover this, and I'm going to cut the heat off completely. You could simmer this over low or put it on a warming plate, but I think it's perfect right where it is, and it only needs to sit for about another 10 or 20 minutes, so that should be fine. And here's a tip for the best crust on a pan pizza. Butter your pan. Just a little bit of butter like this and just rub it all over the pan, even on the sides. You could use a liquid oil if you want, but I find that the viscosity of the butter on the cold pan actually helps the pizza dough cling to the pan, making it easier to form. And getting some on our hands is a bonus because the dough won't stick to them either. Speaking of which, here's our dough after rising for 30 minutes and getting punched down. We just want to press this out into our pan. It's going to have a tendency to be real stretchy and spring back on you as you try and form it into the pan because of all that gluten we developed in the food processor, but just keep working at it. I like to apply a little extra butter or oil to my hands just to keep the dough from sticking as I work. Hopefully we don't go too dough nuts as we do that, but anyway, once it's in the pan, I'm simply going to cover that with a second sheet pan or some aluminum foil and let that rise again for about 30 minutes. After which it'll be nicely puffed up for us and we can go ahead and add our sausage gravy to our sausage gravy pizza. Now, you don't have to add all of the sausage gravy mix on the top here if you don't want to, but I did wind up using all of mine because I really wanted to simulate that smothered biscuits and gravy feeling from that classic southern dish. You might prefer yours with a little less sausage gravy, and if you do, that's okay. I won't judge you too much. Anyway, once we get that all smoothed out, we want to go ahead and whisk this off to a preheated 425 degree oven where we're going to cook this for about 20 minutes. And if you wanted to stop halfway through and crack a couple of eggs on there and then finish cooking for another 10 minutes, well, be careful. You might accidentally create the best breakfast pizza of all time. Once that comes out of the oven, the first thing we want to do is get it out of the pan and onto a wire rack like this. That lets the steam escape the crust rather than being trapped by the pan, keeping the crust nice and crispy. We want to let that cool for about 5 minutes, and then we can go ahead and get that off the rack and get our sausage and gravy pizza sliced up. This was a fun food experiment that really turned out great, so I highly recommend it. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode of Passion for Food. If you have, give me a thumbs up below and don't forget to subscribe and hit that little bell so you don't miss our future recipes. And if you're looking for meal ideas, because who isn't, check out one of our other great videos playing on the screen now. This has been Graham with Passion for Food. Okay, once we get this smoothed out on our pizza, we want to go ahead and whisk this off to a pre-100... Cut!